John Assmann is a German Egyptologist. Building on the work of Maurice Holbrook, Assmann extends the concept of collective memory into a full blown theory of culture. His central question is deceptively simple: how do societies remember? But the answers he develops are remarkably rich and complex. Osman argues that human memory is not simply a psychological phenomenon located inside individual brains. It is also a social cultural phenomenon that depends on external systems of storage and communication. Without these external supports, societies would be trapped in an eternal present, unable to preserve the knowledge, values, and identity that bind them together across generations. What makes Asman's contributions so important is his insistence that memory operates on two fundamentally different levels. These two levels are not just different in degree but in kind. The first he calls communicative memory, and the second cultural memory. Communicative memory is the memory of the recent past, the kind of memory that people share with their contemporaries. It is based on lived experience and oral communication, and it typically extends no more than 80 to 100 years. This is the memory of grandparents, of eyewitness accounts, of stories told within living communities. As those who experiences events directly die out, communicative memory fades with them. Cultural memory is the long term memory of societies. It reaches back into the distant past, often thousands of years, and is preserved through fixed objectifications: texts, monuments, rituals, images, and other symbolic forms. While communicative memory is informal and diffuse, cultural memory is institutionalized and depends on specialists, priests, scribes, poets, scholars who are charged with preserving and transmitting it. Osman draws attention to a fascinating phenomenon that he calls the floating gap. In oral societies, historical consciousness operates on only two registers: the recent past, which people remember through personal experience and hearsay, and the time of origins, which is preserved in myths and foundational stories. Both these two lies in a gap, a period of several generations that has dropped out of living memory. This gap is not fixed but moves forward as generations pass, hence the term floating. What this reveals is that without writing, societies cannot maintain a continuous record of the past. They skip from the immediately remembered to the mythically remote. Writing changes everything. It allows societies to bridge the gap and create a continuous historical record. But Osman is careful to note that writing alone does not guarantee cultural memory. Writing also enables forgetting. Texts can be lost, destroyed, or simply ignored. The stream of tradition flows only as long as texts are copied, read, and interpreted. At the center of Osman's theory is the concept of connective structure. Every culture must create a structure that binds people together in two dimensions: the social and the temporal. Socially, culture provides a shared symbolic universe, a common area of experience, expectation, and action that binds individuals into communities. Temporally, culture links yesterday with today by giving form and presence to influential experiences and memories, incorporating images and tales from another time into the ongoing present. This connective structure is what gives a culture its coherence and continuity. It is the basis of identity, the foundation on which people can say we. The basic principle behind all connective structures is repetition. Repetition guarantees that lines of action will not branch out into infinite variation but will establish themselves in recognizable patterns that are immediately identifiable as elements of a shared culture. Initially, this repetition takes the form of ritual. Rituals are performed over and over, preserving the knowledge and values that define the group. But as societies develop writing, a new form of collective structure emerges. Instead of ritual repetition, we get textual interpretation. The fixed text becomes the foundation, and interpretation becomes the means of preserving meaning across changing circumstances. This distinction between ritual and textual coherence is one of Assmann's most important contributions. In societies based on ritual coherence, continuity is maintained through performance. The ritual is repeated exactly as it has always been done, and meaning is embedded in action. In societies based on textual coherence, continuity is maintained through interpretation. The text is fixed, but its meaning must be continuously reinterpreted to remain relevant to changing circumstances. This shift from ritual to textual coherence transforms the very nature of cultural memory. It introduces the possibility of variation, innovation, and critique. The written text can be questioned in ways that the ritual performance cannot. The transition from ritual to textual coherence is not simply a technological change driven by the invention of writing, it is also a social and political change. It creates new roles for specialists, scribes, scholars, and interpreters who become the guardians of cultural memory. It also creates new forms of authority. The interpreter of the text now stands alongside the performer of the ritual as a source of cultural meaning. Assmann develops a detailed theory of canonization. The canon is a principle that elevates a culture's connective structure to a level at which it becomes impervious to time and change. Canonization dams the stream of tradition, drawing a definitive line between what is authoritative and what is not. Once a text is canonized, nothing may be added, nothing taken away, and nothing changed. The canon becomes the fixed point around which cultural memory organizes itself. Canonization is not simply a conservative impulse, it is also a response to crisis. When societies face external threats or internal conflicts, they often turn to canonization as a way of preserving their identity. The canon becomes a fortress, protecting tradition against the forces of change and assimilation. But canonization also creates new problems. The fixed text must be interpreted, and interpretation becomes a site of ongoing contestation. The canon gives rise to commentary, and commentary gives rise to further interpretation, creating a rich and complex tradition. Cultural memory is intimately bound up with identity. Groups base their awareness of unity and uniqueness on events that take place in the past. A nation lives by reviving its past. The imagined community is based on an imagined continuity that reaches back into the depths of time. This is what Assmann calls political imagination, the process by which communities construct their collective identity through memory. Identity is not a natural growth, but a cultural creation. It requires consciousness, reflection, and deliberate construction. The individual becomes aware of belonging to a group through participation in shared memory. And the group itself only exists insofar as its members recognize themselves as belonging to it. Memory and identity are thus mutually constitutive. Assmann distinguishes between two types of cultural formation, integrative and distinctive. Integrative cultures use memory to create internal unity, bringing diverse groups together under a common tradition. Distinctive cultures use memory to mark boundaries, emphasizing what separates them from others. Both processes are at work in all societies, but different circumstances emphasize one over the other. In times of empire and expansion, integrative memory predominates. In times of resistance and self-definition, distinctive memory comes to the fore. The relationship between cultural memory and identity is dynamic and dialectical. Memory shapes identity, but identity also shapes memory. What a community chooses to remember depends on who it wants to be. Cultural memory is not simply a means of retaining information, but a force that can shape cultural identity and allow cultures to respond creatively to both daily changes and catastrophic changes. Memory is not passive storage, but active reconstruction. Societies remember because they need to, because memory serves their present purposes. This is what makes Assmann's theory so valuable. It explains not only how societies remember, but also why they remember and why they forget. Cultural memory is always selective, always shaped by the needs and interests of the present. It is not a transparent record of the past, but a constructed image that serves the present. And because it is constructed, it can be changed. Memory can be manipulated, suppressed, or reinvented. The study of cultural memory is also the study of power, identity, and the politics of the past.